A dream can vanish in seconds, yet leave behind the feeling of a life that was already in motion. Another home, another choice, another version of you, waking somewhere the mind cannot prove and cannot fully dismiss. This video follows that strange boundary with care, moving from REM sleep and memory to lucid dreaming, déjà vu, quantum branching, and the unproven idea that some dreams may feel like echoes of parallel lives. If this kind of calm, thoughtful science journey helps you relax, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who enjoys quiet mysteries of the mind and universe. Your support helps Slow Space Bedtime keep creating gentle, long-form explorations. Thank you for spending your time here. Leave a comment with the city or country you're listening from, what time it is there, and whether this is part of sleep, study, work, or a quiet pause in your day. The first signal comes from sleep itself, where the brain begins building another world behind closed eyes. Begins with the ordinary fact of sleep, not with a doorway. During the night, the brain does not shut down into darkness. It changes its pattern of work. Sensory input becomes weaker. Movement is partly blocked. Memory systems reorganize recent experience, and emotional circuits remain active enough to give private images a strong feeling of reality. Dreams arise inside this altered state, built from memory, expectation, bodily signals, and the brain's constant attempt to create a coherent world from incomplete information. Most of the time, this is enough to explain why dreams can feel strange. They are not random in the simple sense, but neither are they usually exact messages from somewhere else. They are constructed experiences, shaped by a nervous system that keeps modelling reality even when the outside world has grown quiet. Still, some dreams leave a different impression. They do not feel like passing fragments. They feel continuous, stable, emotionally weighted, and strangely independent of the waking life that surrounds them. A person may wake from such a dream with the sense of having returned from another existence, not because the dream has proved anything, but because its internal structure feels too complete to dismiss easily. That is where the question begins. It begins not with proof of parallel universes, but with a mismatch between what dream science can explain well and what certain dream experiences feel like from the inside. The scientific foundation remains clear. Dreaming is strongly linked to the activity of the sleeping brain, especially during rapid eye movement sleep, when vivid visual scenes, strong emotion, and unusual story logic become more common. In this state, parts of the brain involved in sensory imagery and emotional memory can become highly active, while regions that normally check reality and impose strict logical order are less dominant. The result is a mind that can accept impossible transitions without surprise, and attach deep feeling to scenes that would seem unstable in waking thought. This helps explain why a dream can move from a childhood home to an unfamiliar city without any sense of contradiction, or why someone long absent can appear with the emotional force of a real encounter. The brain is not merely displaying images. It is creating a temporary world model and placing a self inside it. That self reacts, chooses, fears, remembers, and often believes the world is real until waking interrupts it. This alone gives dreams their power. Yet the same mechanism that makes ordinary dreams convincing also makes the stranger question difficult. If the sleeping brain can generate a world that feels lived in, then vividness alone cannot show that the world exists beyond the mind. A dream that feels real is still not evidence that it is real. Scientific caution has to begin there. The feeling of reality is an important part of the experience, but it is not the same as independent confirmation. The brain is capable of producing presence, continuity, and emotional truth without needing an external universe as its source. Memory can recombine old details into new arrangements. Emotion can give importance to scenes that never occurred. The mind can invent familiar faces that do not match anyone known, and it can create places that feel navigable, because dream space borrows from the structure of real memory. A careful documentary approach has to hold both sides at once. Dreams can be explained in many ways through known neuroscience, and some dreams still raise questions about why consciousness feels so wide, so flexible, and so difficult to reduce to simple mechanical description. The idea that dreams might be glimpses of parallel lives belongs to speculation, not established science. It draws part of its strength from modern physics, especially interpretations of quantum mechanics in which reality contains many possible outcomes. But those interpretations were developed to address the behavior of quantum systems, not to explain personal dreams. Connecting them to the sleeping mind requires several uncertain steps. There would have to be some physical way for consciousness to receive information from another branch of reality. There would have to be a reason that sleep makes such contact more likely. There would have to be evidence that dream content contains information not available through memory, chance, inference, or ordinary brain activity. At present, those requirements have not been met. What exists is a suggestive comparison quantum theory allows physicists to discuss reality in terms of branching possibilities, while dreams sometimes feel like visits to lives shaped by different choices. The resemblance is intriguing, but resemblance is not proof. It is a starting point for careful thought. This distinction matters because the subject can easily drift into exaggeration. A calm scientific view does not need to claim that dreams are definitely parallel universes. It asks why the idea feels compelling, where it touches real science, and where it leaves the ground of evidence. It begins with the experience itself. Alternate life dreams often contain a particular kind of structure. The dreamer may not simply witness a strange event, but inhabit a role with a history attached to it. There may be a different home, a different profession, a different relationship, or a different version of family life. The dream self often accepts these conditions as normal. Waking identity returns only afterward, and with it comes the shock of comparison. For a few seconds or minutes after waking, two versions of life can seem to overlap the known life and the one that has just vanished. This overlap can produce grief, nostalgia, relief, or confusion. It can also leave a quiet question behind. Why did the invented life feel so internally convincing? The most grounded answer is that the brain is skilled at simulation. It constantly predicts what the world is like, even while awake. Perception itself is not a passive recording of reality. It is an active construction, shaped by incoming signals and prior expectation. During sleep, when outside signals are reduced, the constructive side becomes more visible. The brain can generate environments without needing them to be present. It can produce dialogue, although the narrator of this script will not recreate it. It can build scenarios around unresolved fears, desires, memories, and social patterns. From this perspective, an alternate life dream may be the mind testing possible selves. It may explore roads not taken, emotional outcomes not resolved, or identities that remain latent in waking life. The dream is not another universe in a literal sense, but a powerful internal model of possibility. Yet even this conservative explanation is not small. It means that every night the brain can create a temporary life with enough detail to move the waking self. It means that personal identity is more flexible than it feels during the day. It means that the self is not a fixed object, but an ongoing process that can be rearranged in sleep. The parallel universe idea builds on this flexibility. It asks whether some dream selves might be more than simulations. It asks whether the experience of being another version of oneself could point toward a deeper structure of reality. one in which different outcomes are not merely imagined but physically realized elsewhere. In the many worlds interpretation, quantum events do not collapse into a single outcome in the usual sense. Instead, all possible outcomes continue in a larger mathematical structure, with each branch no longer interacting in any ordinary way with the others. This interpretation is serious within physics, though not universally accepted, and it does not by itself say that dreams can cross between branches. The branches, if they exist, are not nearby rooms waiting to be entered. They are separated by the structure of quantum evolution and by the loss of interference between outcomes. For dreams to connect to them, consciousness would need a role that current physics has not established. That is the unproven bridge. The bridge becomes attractive because dreams already feel like a loosening of boundaries. In sleep, the difference between memory and invention can soften. The difference between present and past can blur. The dream self can be both familiar and unfamiliar, carrying emotional commitments the waking self never made. This does not require another universe, but it makes the idea emotionally understandable. A person who dreams repeatedly of the same alternate home, the same unknown partner, the same child, the same city, or the same older version of life may feel that the dream is not being invented anew each night. It may feel as if the dream is being resumed. Continuity is one of the most important features in this mystery. A single vivid dream can be explained as a powerful construction. A recurring dream world with stable geography, changing events, and persistent emotional history creates a different kind of pressure. The known brain can still account for much of this through memory and pattern completion, but the experience feels closer to returning than imagining. This first section therefore does not claim that dreams are parallel universes. It prepares the ground more carefully. The established layer is that dreams are real experiences produced by the sleeping brain, capable of deep emotion, coherent simulation, and lasting memory. The speculative layer is that some dreams resemble alternate lives so strongly that they invite comparison with parallel realities. Between those layers lies the honest question of the entire script. Not whether every dream is a hidden universe, and not whether every strange feeling must be cosmic evidence, but whether the sleeping mind reveals something profound about possibility, identity, and the way reality might be larger than waking experience can show. The boundary remains soft, but not empty. On one side is neuroscience, with its measurable changes in sleep and memory. On the other is quantum speculation, with its branching worlds and unsettled interpretations. In the middle is the dream itself, private, vivid, and difficult to carry back intact. That is where the investigation begins, with a mind asleep, a self briefly rearranged, and an alternate life fading before it can be tested. The many worlds interpretation begins with a problem that is smaller than a dream and less personal than a human choice. It begins with the behavior of matter at quantum scale, where particles are described not as having one fixed set of properties at every moment, but as existing in a mathematical spread of possible states. An electron may be described as having several possible positions before a measurement is made. A photon may be described as having more than one possible path. In the standard language of quantum mechanics, these possibilities are not treated as ordinary ignorance, as if the particle secretly chose one path and observers merely do not know it yet. They are part of the physical description itself. The mathematics works with probabilities, and those probabilities produce some of the most precise predictions in science. The difficulty is not whether the mathematics succeeds. It does. The difficulty is what the mathematics means. When a measurement occurs, ordinary experience seems to show one result. The detector records one outcome. The scientist sees one reading, and the world continues as though only one possibility became real. In many common interpretations, this is described as a collapse of the wave function, where the spread of possibilities reduces to a single observed result. The many worlds interpretation, first proposed by Hugh Everett in the middle of the 20th century, removes that collapse. It suggests that the wave function never truly collapses. Instead, all outcomes contained in the quantum description continue, each in a branch of the larger universal state. In one branch, the detector records one result. In another branch, it records another. Each branch contains a consistent history from that point onward, and each observer inside a branch experiences only the result that belongs to that branch. This is not the same as saying that new universes burst into existence like separate objects in empty space. It is a statement about the continuing structure of quantum reality. The word branch is a useful simplification for describing parts of the universal wave function that no longer interfere with one another in any practical way. That separation is tied to decoherence, the process by which quantum systems become entangled with their environment so thoroughly that their different possible outcomes stop behaving as a single observable pattern. Decoherence does not require a conscious mind to look at the system. A particle interacting with surrounding matter, radiation, or measuring equipment can lose the delicate interference that made its quantum alternatives visible. Once that happens, the different outcomes become effectively isolated. The world appears classical, stable, and definite from the inside, even if the deeper mathematics still contains all branches. This gives many worlds its strange power. It preserves the quantum equations without adding a special collapse event, but it does so at the cost of accepting a reality far larger than ordinary perception suggests. Every quantum interaction that produces distinct outcomes becomes part of an expanding structure of alternatives. The interpretation is respected by some physicists and rejected or doubted by others. It remains one way of understanding quantum theory, not a settled description of what exists. Its connection to dreams is even less settled. The leap from electron measurements to alternate versions of a person is not a simple scientific step. Human decisions are macroscopic events, shaped by brains, bodies, histories, social pressures, memories, and countless physical interactions. Since the brain is made of matter, and matter is quantum at its deepest level, any complete physical description of a decision would ultimately rest on quantum processes. But that does not mean that every choice should be pictured as a clean fork where one version of a person chooses one path and another version chooses the opposite. Real decision-making is gradual, noisy, and distributed across many levels of biology. It involves neural signals, hormone states, learned associations, emotional evaluation, and environmental context. The many worlds interpretation may imply that different macroscopic histories exist in the universal wave function, but it does not provide a simple map of personal destiny. It does not mark a branch for every regret, every missed opportunity, or every private wish. Those are human categories placed over a physical theory built for measurement and probability. Still, the emotional appeal is understandable. A person does not experience life as a set of particle interactions. Life is experienced as choices, the accepted job, the refused move, the relationship begun, the relationship ended, the sentence spoken, the silence kept. These moments become markers in personal memory because they seem to divide the possible future. Afterward, the mind can sense the shadow of the unchosen path. That shadow is normally psychological. It is made of imagination, memory, and counterfactual thinking. The mental ability to consider what might have happened under different conditions. Counterfactual thinking is important for learning. It allows the brain to compare outcomes, prepare for future decisions, and make meaning from events that cannot be replayed. Dreams often use the same capacity. During sleep, the brain may place the self inside scenarios that test different emotional outcomes. A person may dream of a career never pursued, a home never lived in, or an apology never offered. The experience can feel like another life because the dream does not present it as a thought experiment. It presents it as immediate reality. The speculative parallel universe idea enters at this point, where physics and inner experience appear to rhyme without yet proving any connection. If many worlds is correct, then reality may contain histories in which events unfolded differently. If dreams can produce the feeling of inhabiting an alternate history, then it becomes tempting to ask whether a dream might ever align with one of those histories, rather than merely inventing it. The careful answer is that no established mechanism shows how this would happen. Branches in many worlds are not normally available for communication. Decoherence is precisely what makes them separate from the perspective of observers inside them. A dream would need to overcome or bypass that separation, and current physics offers no confirmed process by which a sleeping brain can receive information from another branch. This is the central constraint. Without it, the idea becomes too easy. Any vivid alternate life dream could be called another universe, and the claim would no longer be testable. Scientific meaning depends on limits. A hypothesis must face the possibility of being wrong. For parallel universe dreams to move beyond speculation, they would need patterns that cannot be explained by ordinary memory, chance, suggestion, cultural influence, or the brain's ability to simulate. They would need verifiable information from a supposed alternate history, repeated under controlled conditions, with clear separation from known sources. That evidence does not currently exist. What exists instead is a more modest but still interesting field of comparison. Dreams show that the self can be placed into convincing alternative situations. Quantum theory shows that the physical world may not reduce neatly to one classical story at the deepest level. The human question forms between them. If there are other branches, what is the status of the selves inside them? Are they truly other persons, complete centres of experience, or only parts of a mathematical description? Many worlds often treats observers in other branches as just as real as observers in this one, because each branch contains its own coherent records, memories, and physical continuity. From inside any branch, the world appears singular. The observer has no direct access to the others. This creates a quiet philosophical pressure. Identity may not be as narrow as ordinary life suggests. A person may feel like a single line through time, but physics, at least under this interpretation, permits a larger structure in which many related histories exist without meeting. The dream of another self gains its force from that possibility. It feels personal, but its source, if literal, would be deeply impersonal, arising not from fate or message, but from the mathematical openness of quantum reality. Yet the sleeping brain may not need literal access to other branches to reveal something important about possible selves. Dreams can compress the emotional meaning of unchosen lives into direct experience. They can show how identity might have shifted under different conditions. They can make a person feel, for a moment, the weight of another profession, another family structure, another landscape of responsibility, or another version of loss. In psychological terms, this is already powerful. It allows the mind to process decision and uncertainty without conscious planning. In speculative terms, it resembles what contact with another branch might feel like if such contact were possible. The resemblance should be treated with care. A dream may be a simulation that borrows the language of parallel lives, not a report from a parallel life itself. The distinction matters because the strongest questions are not weakened by caution. They become sharper If parallel universes exist, they may remain forever beyond direct experience. If dreams are only internal models, they still show that the brain can generate selves that feel temporarily complete. If the two are somehow connected, the connection lies beyond present evidence and would require a new understanding of consciousness, information, and quantum separation. This is the threshold left by many worlds. It does not prove that another version of the dreamer is being seen at night. It shows only that modern physics has room for a reality larger than the single path remembered after waking. The next step is to examine the sleeping brain itself, because any proposed bridge to another life must pass through the known machinery of sleep before it can reach the unproven edge of the multiverse. Rapid eye movement sleep is one of the clearest reasons dreams can feel like complete experiences rather than loose images. During this state, the brain becomes active in a pattern that partly resembles waking life, while the body remains largely still, and the outside world is held at a distance. The eyes move beneath closed lids. Breathing and heart rhythm may become less regular, and the sleeping mind begins to generate scenes with colour, movement, emotion, and a sense of personal presence. This does not mean the brain is awake in the ordinary sense. It means that sleep contains its own form of organised activity. Some systems are highly engaged, while others are reduced or working differently. That uneven pattern is important, because it helps explain why dreams can be vivid, emotional, and convincing while also being unstable, illogical, and difficult to test from inside the experience. The dreamer may accept an unfamiliar city as home, recognize a stranger as family, or carry a memory of events that never happened in waking life. None of this requires contact with another universe. It follows from how the sleeping brain builds experience when perception, memory, and self-monitoring are operating under unusual conditions. Yet this same condition gives the parallel universe idea its strongest psychological foothold. In rapid eye movement sleep, the mind is not simply replaying the day, it is constructing a present tense world and placing a version of the self inside it. That version may think, choose, remember, and feel with enough coherence that waking afterward can seem less like leaving a fantasy and more like being removed from a life already underway. The established science begins with sensory filtering. During sleep, the brain reduces its normal dependence on external input. Sounds, touch, temperature, and signals from the body still exist, and they can sometimes enter dreams. But the sleeping brain is less governed by the steady correction provided by waking perception. In waking life, the world constantly pushes back. A wall remains a wall, a room keeps its proportions, and other people respond in ways that limit imagination. During dreaming, that external correction is weaker. The brain has more freedom to generate a world from internal sources. Visual association areas may help create places and faces. Emotional systems may assign importance. Memory networks may supply fragments of past experience. The result can feel real because the brain is using many of the same general tools involved in ordinary experience, but without the same level of outside constraint. A dream scene may be built from remembered streets, half-forgotten rooms, and emotional expectations, then presented as a new environment with its own immediate logic. This is one reason dream places can feel both unknown and familiar. They are not exact copies of waking locations. They are organized from memory in ways that can create a strong sense of recognition without a direct source. Memory plays a central role in this process, but not as a simple archive. The sleeping brain does not open a file and replay it unchanged. During sleep, memory systems are involved in consolidation, integration, and emotional processing. Experiences from waking life can be strengthened, weakened, reorganized, or associated with older material. The hippocampus, which is important for forming and retrieving episodic memory, interacts with wider cortical networks as the brain sorts recent experience into longer-lasting patterns. Dreams may draw from this activity without copying it directly. A recent conversation may appear as a different person. A childhood fear may become a new location. A long-standing desire may appear as an alternate career or relationship. This helps explain why dreams about other lives can feel meaningful even when they are not literal reports. They may be assembled from emotional memory rather than chronological memory. The dream does not need to preserve what happened. It may preserve how something feels, then build a scenario around that feeling. In an alternate life dream, the brain might take the emotional trace of regret, curiosity, or unresolved possibility and give it a complete setting. The dream self then inhabits that setting as if it had always belonged there. Emotion gives the dream its weight. During rapid eye movement sleep, regions involved in emotional salience can become strongly active, while some areas involved in reflective judgment and deliberate control are less dominant. This combination can make the dream world feel urgent, intimate, or deeply familiar even when its content would not survive waking analysis. A person may wake with grief for someone who does not exist in waking life, or with calm satisfaction from a career never pursued. Because the emotion was real as a brain state even if the story attached to it was constructed. That distinction is essential. An emotion generated in a dream is not fake simply because the event did not occur outside the dream. The nervous system can produce genuine sorrow, affection, fear, relief, and attachment in response to an internally generated scene. For the waking person, the after effect may be lasting. This is one of the reasons dreams are not trivial. They can change mood, reveal concerns, and sometimes shift the way a person understands a choice. But emotional force does not prove external origin. It shows that the sleeping brain can assign reality-like significance to internally created experience. In the context of parallel universe speculation, emotional intensity becomes suggestive only because it feels so much like memory. The dream may seem less like imagination, and more like contact with a life where those emotions have a history. The brain also changes its relation to self-awareness during sleep. In ordinary dreams, the dreamer usually does not recognize the dream as a dream. The self inside the dream accepts the situation and responds from within it. This happens partly because the systems that support reality testing, critical reflection, and stable autobiographical orientation are not operating in the same way they do while awake. The dream self may remember a fictional past, accept impossible circumstances, or fail to notice that a familiar person has a different face. This lowered reality monitoring is not a flaw in dreaming. It is part of what allows the dream to become immersive. The mind does not constantly interrupt the scene to check whether it makes sense. It commits to the model it is generating. In alternate life dreams, this commitment can be especially strong. The dream self may not feel like a visitor. It may feel like the rightful owner of the life being lived. Only upon waking does the contradiction appear. The waking self returns with its ordinary biography, and the dream biography collapses. For a short time, both may remain emotionally present. This overlap can be unsettling, but it is also scientifically informative. It shows that the sense of being one's self depends on active memory, context, and bodily state. When those supports shift, the self can be experienced in another form. That does not mean identity is unreal. It means identity is maintained, moment by moment, through the brain's organization of memory and perception. Sleep reveals that organization by loosening it. The contrast with lucid dreaming makes the picture more precise. In lucid dreams, some form of reflective awareness returns while the dream continues. The dreamer recognizes the state as a dream, and in some cases can make deliberate choices within it. Laboratory studies have shown that trained lucid dreamers can sometimes signal from sleep through agreed patterns of eye movement or facial muscle activity. This demonstrates that dreaming consciousness is not sealed off in a simple way. It can sometimes process external cues, hold an intention, and send a limited response while remaining in the dream state. That finding is important, but its meaning should not be stretched too far. It shows that the sleeping brain can maintain a bridge between dream experience and the waking laboratory. It does not show that dreams connect to parallel universes. The bridge is within one physical world, using measurable signals and trained responses. Still, lucid dreaming helps refine the larger question because it proves that dream consciousness can be more organized than older assumptions allowed. The dream is not always passive confusion. Under certain conditions, it can include awareness, memory, intention, and communication. If any future claim about parallel reality dreams were to be tested, lucid dreaming would likely be one of the few states where testing could even begin, because the dreamer might attempt to gather information deliberately rather than only report impressions after waking. For now, the known evidence remains on the side of neuroscience. Dreams feel real because the sleeping brain can generate world models with sensory detail, emotional depth, temporary selfhood, and reduced critical filtering. They can feel like other lives because memory and identity become flexible enough to support alternate biographies. They can linger because emotional circuits and memory systems may encode parts of the experience strongly. The speculative question remains outside this evidence, but it is shaped by it. If a parallel universe dream were ever possible, it would have to appear through the same brain systems that already create ordinary dreams. It would have to pass through memory, emotion, self-awareness, and the weakened boundary between internal simulation and perceived reality. That means the first explanation for such a dream must always be the brain itself. Only after memory, emotion, chance, forgotten knowledge, and dream construction have been considered would any more extraordinary interpretation become meaningful. The mind in rapid eye movement sleep is unguarded in a specific scientific sense. It is not free from biology, but it is freed from some of waking life's ordinary constraints. In that state, it can make a life out of fragments, give that life a self, and leave behind a memory strong enough to feel borrowed from somewhere else. The next question is whether any proposed quantum process in the brain could make that feeling more than a feeling, or whether the physics remains far beyond what dreaming can reach. Entanglement is one of the most precise ideas in quantum physics, and one of the easiest to misuse when it is moved into discussions of consciousness. In its proper scientific setting, entanglement describes a shared quantum state between systems that can no longer be fully described as separate, even when the systems are far apart. Measurement of one part is mathematically linked with measurement of the other, in a way that has been confirmed repeatedly in laboratory experiments. This does not mean that usable messages travel faster than light, and it does not mean that every deep connection between things is quantum entanglement. The concept is stricter than ordinary language suggests. It depends on fragile physical conditions, careful isolation, and mathematical relationships that can be tested. The brain, by contrast, is warm, wet, chemically active, and full of constant electrical and molecular motion. These are not ideal conditions for delicate quantum states to survive for long. That basic difficulty is where any discussion of quantum consciousness has to begin. The question is not simply whether quantum effects exist in the brain. At the deepest level, all matter follows quantum rules. The harder question is whether specifically quantum features such as coherence, Superposition or entanglement can remain organized long enough and at a large enough scale to shape conscious experience. Without that step, quantum language adds mystery without adding explanation. Still, the question has not disappeared, because biology has already shown that some living systems can use quantum effects in limited, highly specialized ways. Certain processes in photosynthesis, some enzyme reactions, and proposed mechanisms in animal magnetoreception have encouraged researchers to examine whether life may sometimes protect quantum behavior better than older assumptions allowed. These examples do not prove that the brain is a quantum computer, and they do not prove that dreams reach other realities. They simply keep open a narrower and more careful question: under what conditions can biological structures preserve quantum information long enough to matter? Within that cautious frame, several speculative ideas about the brain have attracted attention. One line of thought focuses on microtubules, tiny protein structures inside cells that help maintain shape, transport materials, and organize internal activity. The physicist Roger Penrose and the anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff have argued, in a controversial theory, that microtubules inside neurons might support quantum processes connected to consciousness. Their model, often called orchestrated objective reduction, proposes that consciousness is not only the result of ordinary neural computation, but may involve quantum events coordinated inside these cellular structures. Most neuroscientists do not treat this as established. Many objections remain, including whether quantum coherence could last long enough in the brain, whether microtubules have the required physical properties, and whether the theory explains specific features of experience better than standard neuroscience. Even so, the theory remains important for this subject because it gives a concrete example of how quantum consciousness has been proposed in physical terms rather than as a vague claim. It places the debate inside cellular biology, not outside science. A second line of speculation looks at structures surrounding nerve fibers, myelin sheaths, the insulating layers that wrap many axons, help electrical signals travel efficiently through the nervous system. Some recent theoretical work has explored whether the geometry of these sheaths could support unusual electromagnetic or photonic behavior, including the possibility that pairs of photons might become linked under certain conditions. The claim is not that the brain has been shown to use entangled photons to produce thought. It is that a physical model has suggested a possible place where quantum optical effects might be investigated. That difference is essential. A theoretical proposal can be interesting without being confirmed as a mechanism of consciousness. It can point toward experiments without settling the question. If photons or electromagnetic modes inside myelin ever prove to have a functional role in neural coordination, the result would be significant for neuroscience. But the distance from that possibility to parallel universe dreaming remains very large. Neural synchronization, the coordinated timing of activity across brain regions, is already studied through known mechanisms such as oscillations, network connectivity, chemical signaling, and feedback loops. The brain does not need quantum entanglement to show coordinated patterns. It already contains many ways for distant regions to influence one another through ordinary biology. Any quantum account would have to do more than sound elegant. It would have to explain something that existing mechanisms cannot explain, and it would have to produce predictions that can be tested. That is the standard that keeps speculation useful rather than decorative. The same caution applies to the idea that sleep might reduce neural noise enough for quantum states to become more important. It is true that sleep changes the brain's activity. It alters sensory input, metabolic rhythms, chemical balance, and communication between regions. It is also true that some dreams occur when external attention is greatly reduced, but reduced sensory input does not automatically create quantum coherence. A quieter mind, in the psychological sense, is not the same as a physically isolated quantum system. The brain remains warm and active during sleep. Cells continue exchanging ions. Molecules continue colliding. Blood continues moving. Electrical rhythms continue shifting across large networks. These conditions may support vivid dreaming, memory processing, and emotional simulation, but they do not by themselves show that entanglement is guiding experience. To argue that sleep allows access to another branch of reality, one would need a detailed physical account of how information crosses from that branch into this one, how the information is encoded in neural activity, and why it appears as dream imagery rather than as measurable signals. No such account has been established. The strongest version of the speculation must therefore remain modest. It can say that consciousness is not fully explained, that quantum biology is a real and developing field, and that some researchers have proposed quantum processes in neural structures. It can also say that dreams are unusual states in which the brain's normal relation to memory, perception, and selfhood changes. What it cannot honestly say is that entanglement in the brain has been shown to connect sleeping people with alternate selves. That claim would go beyond the evidence. The gap is not a small detail. It is the difference between science and story. Yet the gap itself is informative. It shows where the mystery actually lies. The mystery is not whether quantum mechanics is strange. It is. The mystery is not whether dreams can feel like other lives. They can. The deeper problem is whether consciousness has any physical access to information outside the ordinary causal history of the brain. Standard neuroscience says that dream content comes from memory, emotion, sensory traces, prediction, and internal simulation. A quantum parallel reality hypothesis would have to add a new source of information. It would have to explain why some dream details could not come from forgotten memories, creative recombination, coincidence, or unconscious inference. It would also have to explain why this information is usually vague, symbolic, unstable, and difficult to verify. These are not reasons to forbid speculation. They are the conditions that speculation must eventually face. The brain is not a passive receiver waiting for hidden signals. It is an active organ that builds models continuously. If a weak or unusual signal ever entered it, the signal would still be shaped by memory, language, emotion, and expectation. A supposed glimpse of another self would not arrive as a clean scientific record. It would be translated into dream form, and that translation would make the evidence hard to separate from ordinary dreaming. This makes parallel universe dream claims especially difficult to test. The very state that gives them emotional force also makes them scientifically fragile. Dreams are private. They are reported after the fact. They change as they are remembered. They often contain symbolic compression rather than literal detail. For a quantum explanation to become persuasive, it would need repeated, controlled results that survive these weaknesses. Until then, quantum consciousness remains a frontier of thought, not a confirmed bridge. The value of examining it carefully is that it prevents the idea from becoming either too easy to believe or too easy to dismiss. Dismissing it too quickly can ignore how incomplete the science of consciousness remains. Believing it too quickly can ignore how much the brain can already do without invoking another universe. The balanced position is quieter and stronger. Known physics allows deep uncertainty about the interpretation of reality. Known biology shows that living systems can sometimes use subtle physical effects. Known neuroscience shows that sleep can create convincing alternate selves. Between these facts sits an unproven possibility that some hidden process might connect mind, dream, and the wider quantum structure of the universe. At present, that possibility has no firm evidence. It is a question with edges, not an answer. The next movement has to stay with what can be tested more directly, because lucid dreaming shows that the sleeping mind can sometimes communicate with the waking world, and that limited bridge is real enough to study. Lucid dreaming gives the study of dreams one of its rare points of contact with measurement. In an ordinary dream, the experience is known mainly through memory after waking, and that creates a scientific problem from the beginning. The report may be sincere and detailed, but it arrives after the state has ended. Details can shift. Emotional emphasis can change. The waking mind may impose order on scenes that were less orderly when they occurred. Lucid dreaming changes this situation because the dreamer becomes aware of dreaming while the dream is still happening. The dream remains internally generated, but some reflective capacity returns. The person inside the dream can remember an instruction, choose a response, and in trained cases send a signal outward through the sleeping body. This makes lucid dreaming valuable, not because it proves anything about parallel worlds, but because it shows that the dreaming mind is not always sealed inside itself. A limited line of communication can exist between dream experience and the waking laboratory, and that line can be studied. The most common method uses eye movement. During rapid eye movement sleep, most voluntary muscles are strongly inhibited, which helps prevent the body from acting out dreams. The eyes, however, can still move. Researchers have used this feature by training lucid dreamers to make agreed patterns of left and right eye movements when they recognize that they are dreaming. Those movements can be recorded with sleep equipment, allowing the dreamer to mark the moment lucidity begins. This is a simple but important achievement. It turns a private claim into an observable signal. The dreamer is not merely saying later that lucidity occurred. The sleeping body has sent a timed sign while brain and muscle recordings indicate that sleep continued. From there, experiments have gone further. Researchers have presented questions to lucid dreamers through sounds, spoken words, lights, or gentle touch, then asked them to answer from within the dream using eye movements or small facial muscle signals. In one widely discussed set of experiments across several laboratories, sleeping participants were able to respond correctly to some simple questions, including basic arithmetic, while still in the dream state. The success rate was not high enough to suggest ordinary conversation, and many questions received no clear answer. Yet the correct responses were far above what would be expected if nothing meaningful were being processed. This is the evidence limit in its cleanest form. The dreaming brain can sometimes receive external information, understand it, and send back a restricted response. It does not follow that the dreaming brain can receive information from another universe. What has been shown is narrower, but still significant. Sleep is not a complete disconnection. Under special conditions, consciousness can remain organized enough to maintain a dream scene and respond to the outside world at the same time. The reports from these experiments are also revealing because external questions often enter the dream in altered form. A spoken prompt may be experienced as a voice from a radio, a question from someone inside the dream, or an unusual interruption in the scene. The stimulus is real, but the dream does not simply display it as it is. The brain translates it into the ongoing dream environment. This matters for any discussion of alternate reality dreams. If even ordinary laboratory input is reshaped by dream logic, then any hypothetical signal from beyond ordinary experience would likely be reshaped as well. A dream would not be a clear window. It would be an interpretation made by a sleeping brain. The content would pass through memory, expectation, emotion, and the narrative habits of dreaming. That makes extraordinary claims difficult to evaluate. A dream may contain a striking detail, but the route by which that detail entered the experience is rarely obvious. It may have come from external sound, bodily sensation, old memory, inference, coincidence, or later reconstruction. Lucid dreaming does not remove these possibilities. It makes some of them more testable. A trained lucid dreamer can attempt a task during sleep, and researchers can compare the result with the instruction given. This is the kind of structure science needs. It sets conditions before the dream report arrives. It records timing. It separates successful signals from failed ones. It allows repetition. These qualities are missing from most stories about dreams that seem to come from another life. Such dreams may be emotionally powerful, but emotional power alone cannot decide their source. The value of lucid dreaming research is that it shows how a dream claim can be brought closer to evidence without stripping the experience of its unusual character. It also shows how modest the evidence usually becomes once testing begins. The dreaming mind is capable, but not freely capable. It can respond, but only sometimes. It can understand, but often through distortion. It can signal, but only through narrow channels. These constraints are not disappointing. They are what make the findings trustworthy. They keep the subject grounded in actual sleep physiology rather than in wishful extension. Some recent private and commercial efforts have claimed progress toward more complex dream communication, including simple exchanges between sleeping participants or control of devices during lucid dreaming. These reports are interesting, but they require careful separation from established laboratory findings. A device may detect signals from a sleeper and translate them into an action, but that is still communication through normal physical equipment. It does not show mind-to-mind contact without mediation. It also does not show contact with parallel selves. The same caution applies to any claim that dream technology will soon open direct access to alternate realities. The present evidence supports a more restrained conclusion. Dreaming consciousness can sometimes interact with the waking world through trained signals. The implications for sleep research, therapy, and the study of awareness are real. The implications for the multiverse remain speculative. Still, lucid dreaming changes the wider question in an important way. It shows that consciousness during sleep can hold more structure than ordinary dream forgetting suggests. A lucid dreamer may remember the waking plan, recognize the state, control attention, and make choices inside the dream. This means the dream self can become an investigator of its own environment. If recurring alternate life dreams are ever to be studied seriously, lucidity could provide a method. The dreamer might try to observe stable details, test whether a location remains consistent, ask for information, or signal the moment a particular dream world appears. None of this would prove a parallel universe by itself, but it could help distinguish between a loose dream impression and a repeatable dream environment. It could also reveal how much continuity is created by memory across nights. For example, a lucid dreamer who returns to the same imagined city might map it, compare later reports, and examine whether its geography changes in predictable ways. If the city becomes more coherent over time, that may show the brain strengthening an internal model. If impossible new details appear, those too would need to be checked against ordinary sources before any unusual explanation is considered. In every case, lucid dreaming offers procedure before interpretation. It asks what can be done, recorded, repeated, and compared. That is why it belongs near the center of this investigation. It neither confirms the parallel universe idea nor makes it irrelevant. It sets a standard for what stronger evidence would have to look like. A claim of contact with another self would need more than vividness, more than longing, and more than the feeling of return. It would need information, timing, and repeatability. It would need to survive the known ways dreams absorb memory and external cues. It would need to show that the explanation from ordinary brain activity is not enough. Lucid dreaming has not delivered that result. What it has delivered is a measured example of sleeping awareness reaching outward in a limited and observable way. That is already a meaningful discovery. It suggests that the line between sleep and waking is not a wall, but a regulated boundary with narrow openings. Through those openings, researchers can study how a dream receives the world, how the self behaves when reality testing partly returns, and how consciousness keeps continuity under conditions that normally dissolve it. The question of parallel universes remains beyond that boundary. Yet after lucid dreaming, it can be asked with more discipline. The issue is no longer simply whether dreams feel like other lives. The issue is whether the dreaming mind, when aware of itself, can gather evidence that points beyond its own construction. So far, the answer is restrained. The sleeping mind can communicate. It can sometimes calculate, remember, choose, and report while the dream continues. It can turn a laboratory question into part of a private scene and still answer it correctly. These facts widen the scientific picture of dreaming without breaking it. They show a form of contact inside sleep, not contact across realities. The next movement has to return to the dreams that most often inspire the parallel world interpretation recurring worlds that seem to continue, change, and wait for the dreamer across many nights. Recurring dream worlds create a different kind of question from single vivid dreams. A single dream can be intense, detailed, and emotionally convincing, yet still vanish as a one-time construction of the sleeping brain. A recurring world suggests a pattern that has been stored, returned to, and changed across time. The dreamer may find the same coastline, the same apartment building, the same school, the same unfamiliar town, or the same road system appearing again in later dreams. Sometimes the location is not identical each time, but it keeps enough structure to be recognized. Rooms appear in expected places. Streets lead where they led before. A building that was closed in one dream may be entered in another. The dream does not merely repeat, it resumes. This is why sequential dreams carry such force in the parallel universe question. They give the impression that a separate setting has continued to exist outside the single night of sleep, from a scientific point of view. Continuity does not require an external world. The brain is capable of preserving internal models, especially when those models carry emotional importance. Waking memory can keep track of places that do not exist outside imagination, as shown by novels, games, plans, and private daydreams. Dream memory can do something similar, though in a less deliberate and less stable way. If a particular dream location returns often enough, the waking mind may begin to remember it as a coherent place. The next dream can then draw from that memory, strengthening the sense of return. In this way, recurrence can be built gradually. A place that first appears as scattered fragments may become more organized because the brain reuses it, fills gaps, and attaches new emotional material to it. This process is not deception. It is one of the ordinary powers of memory. The brain does not store every detail like a fixed recording. It reconstructs experience each time it remembers, often preserving the general pattern while changing the details. Dream worlds may grow through the same reconstruction. Each return adds new structure, and the added structure makes later returns more convincing. The feeling of continuity may therefore be produced by a loop between dreaming and remembering, where the dream builds the world and waking memory helps stabilize it afterward. The strongest examples are not simple recurring nightmares or repeated stress dreams. They are ongoing settings with a sense of geography and history. Many people report dream cities that combine features of real places but do not match any actual map. There may be a central station, a hill district, a university, a hospital, a market, or a shoreline, all arranged in a way that feels known inside the dream. The dreamer may move through these areas with confidence, even if waking memory later finds the layout difficult to describe. In some cases, the same dream version of a childhood home appears for years, altered from the real home but consistent within itself. In others, The dreamer returns to an impossible workplace or school that seems to hold records of earlier dream events. This is where the experience begins to feel less like invention and more like access. The dream self does not need to learn the place from the beginning. It arrives already oriented. It may remember what happened there before. It may expect certain people to be nearby. It may know which rooms are private, which paths are dangerous, or which destinations matter. That built-in familiarity is one of the main reasons these dreams can be interpreted as glimpses of another life. Yet cognitive science offers a grounded explanation. The brain is a pattern-making system. It forms spatial maps, social expectations, and emotional associations. During waking life, the hippocampus and related memory networks help organize space and event sequences. During sleep, those networks can reactivate and recombine stored material. A dream city may be a hybrid structure, built from real neighborhoods, remembered buildings, seen images, and emotional categories such as safety, uncertainty, work, childhood, or escape. The dream does not have to copy a real city. It only has to organize memory in a way that the dreaming self can navigate. Once that organization has been experienced, the mind can return to it. The sense of a second geography may be the result of repeated activation of the same internal pattern. Still, the psychological explanation does not remove the mystery of how complete these worlds can feel. A dream place can contain more than visual scenery. It can carry a social order, a personal history, and a mood that remains stable across separate nights. The dreamer may know which relationships belong there, what obligations exist, and what unresolved events are waiting. This matters because identity is tied to setting. A person is not the same in every environment. The self that appears in a dream city may have different habits, different responsibilities, and different assumptions about life. That dream self can feel continuous because the place itself supports continuity. When the setting returns, the role returns with it. This is one reason alternate life dreams can be so persuasive. They do not only show a different scene, they place consciousness inside a different arrangement of memory and belonging. The parallel universe interpretation turns this experience outward. It asks whether recurring dream worlds might be stable, because they are not being invented inside one brain, but perceived, however imperfectly, from another branch of reality. In that view, the dream city feels consistent because it is a real environment somewhere else, and the dreamer is not constructing it, but briefly aligning with a version of self who lives there. This remains speculative, and it faces the same problem as every parallel dream claim. No confirmed mechanism explains how information would pass between branches, and no controlled evidence shows that recurring dream worlds contain independent data from alternate realities. Consistency by itself is not enough. A fictional world can be consistent. A remembered fantasy can be consistent. A dream setting can be consistent because the brain has learned it. What would matter scientifically is not only recurrence, but verifiable structure that could not reasonably come from memory, chance, or prior exposure. If a recurring dream world produced accurate information about an unknown location, an undiscovered fact, or a repeatable target set before sleep, the question would become sharper. Most accounts do not meet that standard. They remain personal, meaningful, and difficult to test. The more cautious interpretation is that recurring dream worlds reveal how the mind organizes possibility. They show that dreams can create durable environments for emotional processing. A person may return to a dream school when facing evaluation, even long after formal education has ended. Another may return to a dream airport during periods of transition, or to a dream house when questions of family, privacy, or memory are active. The location is not random, even if it is not literal. It becomes a stable container for certain kinds of experience. Over time, the dream world accumulates meaning. It can change as the person changes. Rooms may open that were once closed. Paths may become easier. Figures who once threatened may become distant or irrelevant. Such changes can reflect the shifting organization of emotional memory. They can also feel like a parallel life developing on its own schedule. The distinction is not always clear from the inside, because the dream is experienced directly before it is interpreted. What makes sequential dreams especially interesting is that they preserve time in a state often known for breaking it. Many dreams collapse years into moments or move between scenes without transition. Recurring worlds, by contrast, can create the impression of elapsed time. The dreamer may return to find that a relationship has advanced, a place has aged, or a situation has changed since the last visit. This can happen because the brain is able to generate a sense of history without replaying every event. Waking life does the same in a limited way. A person can think of an old friend and immediately understand that time has passed, even without recalling every intervening day. Dreams can assign that same sense of elapsed time to imagined places. The result can be powerful. A dream world may feel as though it has continued in absence, because the brain supplies the emotional and narrative marks of continuation. From a scientific perspective, this is a remarkable feature of consciousness. The mind does not need continuous experience to create continuity. It can infer it, feel it, and inhabit it. From a speculative perspective, this same feature becomes the point of uncertainty. If the dream feels continued, is the continuity created at the moment of dreaming, or is it being received from somewhere the waking self cannot access? The honest answer is that current evidence favours construction, memory, and emotional patterning. The more extraordinary answer remains unproven, but the recurring world remains important even without proving another universe. It shows that the sleeping mind can create places where identity has room to change. It can give the self another history long enough to be felt, if not confirmed. It can make the unchosen life appear not as an abstract possibility, but as a setting with roads, rooms, obligations, and returns. That is why these dreams stay with people. They seem to preserve a life just beyond waking memory, close enough to recognize and too private to verify. The next question is what happens when the strongest part of that life is not the place, but the people who appear to know the dream self from within it. The people who appear inside vivid dreams create the strongest pressure on the idea that dreams are only private images. A place can return and feel stable, but a person inside that place can do something more difficult to explain emotionally. A dream figure can seem to recognize the dream self, remember earlier encounters, carry a mood that is not chosen by the dreamer, and respond in ways that feel independent rather than scripted. In ordinary dream science, this does not require another mind. The brain is highly skilled at social simulation. During waking life, it constantly models what others may think, want, feel, or do. It predicts facial expressions, tones of response, intentions, and emotional consequences. Much of social life depends on this quiet modelling. During sleep, the same capacity can become active without external people present. The brain can generate characters from memory, expectation, fear, affection, and fragments of people known or imagined. These characters may feel autonomous because the dreaming self does not consciously design them. Their behaviour arises from unconscious processing, so it can surprise the dreamer in the same way an unexpected thought can surprise the waking mind. The surprise is real as an experience, even if the source is internal. Yet some dream people leave a stronger impression than ordinary characters. They do not feel like masks worn by memory. They feel like people with private continuity, as if they have been living in the dream world before the dreamer arrived and will continue after waking breaks the connection. This impression is one of the main reasons alternate life dreams can become emotionally difficult to dismiss. In these dreams, the relationship is not always dramatic. It may be calm, domestic, and ordinary. The dream self may share a home, raise a child, work beside a familiar stranger, care for an aging parent who does not exist in waking life, or return to a circle of friends whose names are known only within the dream. The power of the experience comes from its normality. The people are not symbols announcing themselves as symbols. They are woven into a life that feels already established. The dream may carry a sense of shared history without showing that history in detail. The dream self simply knows who matters, who is trusted, where tension remains, and what kind of emotional past belongs to each person. From a neuroscience perspective, this can be explained through memory construction and emotional inference. The brain can create the feeling of long acquaintance without storing a complete fictional biography. It can assign trust, intimacy, resentment, or grief to a dream figure in the same way it can assign familiarity to a dream location. The feeling arrives first, and the mind accepts it as evidence of history. This is similar to how dreams can present a fictional fact as already known. The dream self does not need to ask why a stranger is a sibling, or why an unknown child is deeply loved. The emotional tag has already been attached. Waking afterward reveals the contradiction, but inside the dream the relationship is coherent. The emotional tag is not a minor detail. It is the core of the reality effect. Human identity is relational. A person does not know the self only through private memory, but through the network of people who respond, expect, remember, and care. When a dream builds a convincing relationship, it builds a second mirror for the self. The dreamer becomes someone slightly different because the dream person treats that self as belonging to a different life. This can make the alternate self feel unusually complete. A different partner implies a different emotional history. A different child implies a different future and responsibility. A different friend group implies different habits, values, and choices. The dream relationship becomes evidence within the dream for a whole surrounding biography. The waking mind may retain only fragments, but the feeling of having been known by someone else can persist. That persistence is often what gives these dreams their afterlife. A frightening dream may fade once the body calms. A strange visual dream may become amusing or vague. But a dream relationship can leave behind mourning, tenderness, guilt, or longing. The loss is unusual because waking removes not only a scene, but an entire emotional network. The person in the dream may never have existed in waking life, yet the nervous system has formed a real response. Attachment can be generated by internally simulated interaction. This is not proof of another universe, but it shows that emotional reality and external reality are not identical. The body can grieve a relationship that had no waking history. It can miss a child who was never born in this timeline. It can feel loyalty to a partner who was assembled in sleep. The ethical and psychological consequences are real for the person who wakes with them. This is where the parallel universe interpretation becomes understandable. If the dream person feels autonomous, if the relationship carries continuity, and if the emotion remains after waking, it may seem as though the dreamer has touched a real bond belonging to another version of life. The speculation says that the dream figure is not merely a construction, but a person encountered through the experience of a parallel self. In that view, the dreamer is not inventing a spouse, a friend, or a child, but briefly sharing the emotional field of another self who knows them. The difficulty is that every feature making this idea compelling can also be produced by known mental processes. Autonomy can arise from unconscious social simulation. Continuity can arise from repeated memory patterns. Emotional force can arise from active limbic systems during sleep. The dream's power therefore cannot be used as proof of its source. It can only show that the experience deserves careful treatment. A calm scientific approach does not need to flatten these relationships into meaningless noise. It can acknowledge that they may carry psychological truth, even if they do not carry evidence from another world. A dream partner may represent an unexplored way of relating. A dream child may embody responsibility, vulnerability, or unrealized care. A dream friend may hold a form of acceptance or conflict that waking life has not resolved. These interpretations do not reduce the experience. They translate it into the language of mind and emotion. At the same time, they leave open why the translation can feel so much like contact. The brain's capacity to create other-seeming minds is still not fully understood in all its depth. Dream characters sometimes display knowledge, timing, and emotional nuance that the waking self did not plan. They may disagree, withhold, change, or reveal a complexity that feels independent. This independence is partly explained by the divided nature of cognition. The waking self is not aware of all the processes that shape thought. During dreams, those hidden processes may appear as separate figures. The brain can externalize its own uncertainty into a person who seems to stand apart. It can turn conflict into another voice, grief into an absent figure, or desire into someone who waits in a familiar room. The dream person feels independent because the mental process behind them is not under direct control. That is a grounded explanation, but it remains emotionally subtle. The figure may be internal, yet the encounter can still change the waking person. Some dreams lead people to reconsider relationships, repair old wounds, or recognize needs that had no clear name before. Others leave a quiet ache that does not ask for action. Only acknowledgement. In the context of this script, these dream bonds show the most human side of the parallel universe question. Physics may speak of branches, decoherence, and possible histories, but the dreamer usually does not wake thinking about mathematical structure. The dreamer wakes remembering a face, a hand held, a family table, a goodbye, or the feeling of being known in a life that cannot be reached again. That is why the question persists. It is not only a question about whether other universes exist, it is a question about whether consciousness can hold relationships beyond the boundaries of waking biography. The evidence does not justify saying yes in a literal scientific sense. No controlled study has shown that dream people are independent beings from other branches of reality. No established theory explains how their thoughts could enter the sleeping brain. The safer conclusion is that dream relationships are powerful constructions made from the same social and emotional machinery that makes waking life meaningful. But the word construction should not be mistaken for emptiness. A constructed experience can be coherent, transformative, and deeply felt. The sleeping brain can create a person who reveals something about the dreamer, not by delivering a message, but by making a possible relationship feel present. If parallel worlds exist, perhaps some version of this feeling would resemble contact with them. If they do not, the dream still shows that human consciousness contains more relational possibility than one waking life can express. The bond across sleep may be internal, speculative, or both in ways that cannot yet be separated. What remains clear is that the people of vivid dreams often become the strongest carriers of alternate identity. Through them, the dream self is not merely somewhere else. The dream self is loved, challenged, remembered, or missed by someone else. And that makes the alternate life feel inhabited. The next movement follows a different kind of familiarity, one that arrives not during sleep, but in waking life, when a moment seems remembered without a known source. Déjà vu enters waking life quietly, often in the middle of an ordinary moment, a room, a gesture, a sentence, or the angle of light on a familiar surface suddenly feels as if it has already happened. The feeling usually lasts only a short time, but while it is present, it can be strangely convincing. It is not the same as remembering a real event. There may be no clear image of the past, no date, no place, and no sequence that explains the familiarity. Instead, there is a bare sensation of recognition, separated from the evidence that recognition normally requires. This makes déjà vu useful for the question of parallel universe dreams because it shows how the mind can produce familiarity without a known origin. It also shows why subjective certainty must be handled carefully. A person can feel that something has been lived before, while also knowing, on reflection, that no ordinary memory supports it. The established explanation begins with memory systems, especially the brain's ability to judge whether something is new or familiar. Memory is not a single process. It includes detailed recollection, which brings back context and sequence, and familiarity, which gives the sense that something has been encountered before even if the details are missing. In everyday life, these systems often work together. A familiar street may bring back the memory of walking there years earlier. A familiar face may be linked to a name, a place, and a history. In déjà vu, familiarity appears without the supporting structure of recollection. The mind receives the feeling of recognition, but cannot locate the source. This gap creates the unusual texture of the experience. It is memory-like, but incomplete. It feels meaningful, but refuses to identify what it means. Neuroscience has several possible accounts for why this happens. One explanation involves a brief mismatch in the timing or coordination of memory processing. A present scene may be registered in a way that causes it to feel as if it has already passed through memory, even though it is being experienced for the first time. Another explanation focuses on partial resemblance. A current environment may share a layout, mood, or spatial pattern with a forgotten place. The similarity may be too subtle for conscious identification, but strong enough to trigger familiarity. A hallway may resemble a childhood school in its proportions. A conversation may resemble an earlier emotional situation without repeating its content. The brain detects a pattern, but the waking mind cannot retrieve the matching source. Déjà vu, then, appears as a memory without an address. This explanation is simple, but it fits much of what is known about how memory works. The brain is constantly comparing present input with stored patterns. Most of those comparisons never enter awareness. When one of them produces familiarity without context, the result can feel uncanny. Studies of déjà vu also suggest that it is not usually a sign of hidden knowledge. In many cases, it may reflect the brain monitoring its own memory processes. Some research has linked the experience to conflict detection, as if the mind recognizes that a feeling of familiarity has appeared without a valid memory attached to it. In this view, déjà vu is not the brain discovering that the present has happened before. It is the brain noticing that recognition and evidence are out of alignment. That interpretation is important because it makes déjà vu less mysterious in one sense and more interesting in another. The person feels both recognition and doubt at the same time. The feeling says this is familiar. The checking system cannot confirm why. The tension between those two signals gives déjà vu its distinctive quality. This is where dreams enter the discussion. Many people report that déjà vu feels dreamlike, not because the present moment is unreal, but because the familiarity seems to come from a hidden prior experience that cannot be placed in waking life. Sometimes a waking scene appears to match a dream that is only half remembered. Most of the time, this is difficult to evaluate. Dreams are often forgotten quickly, and dream memories can change after waking. Once déjà vu occurs, The mind may search backward and attach the feeling to a vague dream image. This does not require deception. It may be a natural attempt to explain an unexplained sensation, a fragment of dream memory, a current scene, and a sudden wave of familiarity can become linked after the fact. The result may feel like precognition or cross-timeline memory. But ordinary memory reconstruction can produce the same impression. Still, some cases remain personally compelling because the dream association feels strong, specific, and emotionally marked. The dreamer may believe that a waking moment has finally arrived after being encountered earlier in sleep. From a parallel universe perspective, this feeling becomes suggestive. If dreams were ever able to align with alternate branches of reality, déjà vu might be interpreted as the waking self brushing against a memory from another version of life. The present moment would feel familiar because some parallel self has already lived a related event, or because the dream state previously touched a neighboring pattern of experience. This idea is speculative and has no established support in physics or neuroscience. It also faces the same barrier discussed earlier. Branches in the many worlds, interpretation are not known to exchange information. A waking sensation of familiarity does not provide a mechanism for crossing that separation. It is better understood first as a feature of memory, perception, and pattern recognition. Yet the speculative interpretation persists because déjà vu feels like a small failure in the boundary between possible lives. It is not a full dream world, not a lasting relationship, and not a stable alternate biography. It is only a brief pressure of recognition, but that pressure can make the present feel doubled, as if the current scene has another version beneath it. The calmest way to treat this is to separate the feeling from the claim. The feeling is real. The claim that it comes from another universe is unproven. The experience may reveal how the brain handles familiarity under uncertainty, and it may also serve as a symbol for the larger question of parallel selves. In waking life, most people move through events as if the path is singular. Déjà vu interrupts that singleness for a moment. It suggests, emotionally, if not scientifically, that the present might not be alone. The mind feels a trace where no trace should be. In some cases, this may come from the structure of the environment. In others, from a forgotten memory. In others, from the brain briefly mislabeling the new as known. These explanations are enough to account for the phenomenon without leaving neuroscience. But they do not remove the deeper philosophical interest. A system capable of producing false familiarity is also a system capable of showing how fragile the sense of a single, continuous life can be. The self depends on memory to hold time together. When memory gives the wrong signal, time feels folded. A new event appears to carry the emotional tone of an old one. This is a small disturbance, but it points toward a larger truth about consciousness. The past is not only stored behind the present, it is actively used to interpret the present. When that interpretation shifts, reality feels different. Parallel universe dreams draw on a similar disturbance, though in a more elaborate form. They make another life feel remembered. Déjà vu makes a single moment feel remembered. Both experiences depend on familiarity, detached from ordinary evidence. Both can be explained through brain processes. Both can also lead the mind toward wider speculation, because the feeling of recognition is one of the strongest signals reality can give. When that signal appears without a known source, the imagination naturally searches beyond the visible one. The danger is to treat the strength of recognition as proof. The value is to treat it as data about consciousness. Déjà vu shows that the brain's reality model is not a flat recording of the world. It is a layered process of prediction, comparison, memory, and correction. Sometimes those layers align smoothly, and the world feels ordinary. Sometimes they separate, and an ordinary moment becomes charged with unexplained familiarity. For the theme of alternate selves, this means that some experiences that feel like echoes from another life may begin as internal timing errors or pattern matches, but it also means that the mind is built to sense similarity across time, to bind moments together, and to create continuity even when the source is incomplete. That ability may be the reason dreams can feel like other timelines in the first place. They borrow the authority of memory and attach it to constructed scenes. Déjà vu does something briefer. It attaches memory's authority to the waking present without revealing the memory itself. The result is a moment that feels misplaced, as if it belongs to a past that cannot be found. Science can describe several ways such a feeling may arise, and none require another universe. The speculative horizon remains only as an interpretation layered over the experience, not as a conclusion drawn from it. What matters for the investigation is that déjà vu marks the boundary between familiarity and evidence. It shows how easily the mind can feel that it has been somewhere before, even when the record is absent. The next section moves from misplaced familiarity to a harder question: whether some dreams contain details that seem not merely familiar, but unexpectedly specific enough to demand checking. Unknown knowledge in dreams is more difficult to evaluate than vividness, recurrence, or emotional weight. A dream may feel real, but that feeling belongs to the experience itself. A dream may return, but recurrence can grow from memory. A dream person may seem independent, but the sleeping brain can simulate social life with surprising depth. A more challenging claim appears when a dream seems to contain a specific fact the dreamer did not know while awake. The detail may be a place later found on a map, a historical custom, an unfamiliar word, a technical process, a building layout, or a name connected to a real event. These reports are often the strongest personal reason for treating a dream as more than imagination. They seem to suggest that information has entered the mind from outside ordinary memory. In the framework of parallel universe speculation, such details are interpreted as possible leakage from another branch of reality, where another version of the self may have learned or experienced them directly. In a grounded scientific view, however, unknown knowledge must be handled with particular care, because the mind has many ordinary ways of seeming to know what it does not consciously remember. The first explanation is forgotten exposure. Human memory contains far more than the material that can be deliberately recalled. A person may briefly see a name, a place, a photograph, or a documentary scene years before the dream, and later have no conscious memory of the source. The information is not available as a normal recollection, but fragments may remain in the brain. During sleep, those fragments can be recombined and presented as new. When the dreamer later checks the detail and finds that it corresponds to something real, the result can feel extraordinary. Yet the source may have been an unnoticed encounter in waking life. This is sometimes called cryptomnesia, where a memory returns without being recognized as memory. It may feel like invention, intuition, or revelation, but it is actually old information without its label. Dreams are especially suited to this kind of resurfacing because they loosen the usual structure of recall. They can bring together pieces of knowledge that were never connected consciously. A historical image glimpsed in childhood, a phrase heard in passing, and a recent emotional concern can merge into a dream scene that appears to contain new information. The second explanation is inference. The brain is not only a storehouse of memories, it is a prediction system that can make reasonable guesses from partial evidence. If a dreamer knows something about an era, a culture, a profession, or a place, the sleeping mind may generate details that are plausible enough to match reality by chance or by educated patterning. A dream about an old laboratory may include glassware, heat, careful measurement, and unfamiliar substances because those elements fit the general idea of laboratory work. A later search may reveal a real historical technique that resembles the dream. The resemblance may be meaningful to the dreamer, but it does not necessarily show that the dream contained independent knowledge. It may show that the brain made a good inference from scattered background understanding. Humans are often unaware of how much they can infer. A person may not know a fact explicitly, yet still carry enough surrounding knowledge to generate something close to it. Dreams can make such inferences feel external, because the dream self does not experience them as reasoning. They arrive already formed inside the scene. The third explanation is selection. Many dreams are forgotten, and many dream details do not match anything. The details that do match are more likely to be remembered, repeated, and interpreted. This creates a subtle filter. A person may have hundreds of dreams containing unfamiliar names, places, or facts that lead nowhere when checked. One dream detail later corresponds to something real, and that single correspondence becomes important. This does not mean the person is being careless. It reflects a general feature of human attention. Matches stand out more than misses. The more dreams a person has, the more opportunities there are for accidental overlap with real information. Names, locations, historical patterns, and technical concepts are numerous. Some coincidence is expected in a large enough field of possibilities. Scientific testing has to count both hits and misses. Personal memory usually preserves the hit. This is why verification is difficult. A verified detail may be interesting, but its meaning depends on how the detail was selected, how specific it was, whether the dream was recorded before checking, and whether alternative sources were ruled out. A dream written down immediately after waking carries more evidential value than a dream reconstructed after a discovery. A precise detail carries more value than a broad resemblance. A detail unknown to the dreamer but easily available in media carries less value than a detail genuinely obscure and documented before verification. These distinctions do not remove mystery. They help locate it. A careful investigation would ask whether the dream record existed before the fact was known, whether the wording was clear, whether the later match required interpretation, and whether the dreamer had any plausible route of exposure. Without those safeguards, the mind can easily reshape the dream around the discovery. Memory is not fixed after waking. It can be influenced by later research, conversation, and emotional excitement. A vague dream of an old stone building may become, in memory, closer to a real cathedral after the dreamer sees a photograph. A dream name may be adjusted unconsciously toward a real historical name found later. This is not deliberate fabrication. It is normal memory reconstruction. The brain updates its own records, often without marking the change. For this reason, dream verification must be treated more like evidence handling than storytelling. The time of recording matters. The exact words matter. The level of detail matters. The search process matters. The parallel universe hypothesis would require unusually strong cases, not merely impressive anecdotes. It would require dream information that is specific, recorded in advance, inaccessible by ordinary means, and repeatedly confirmed under conditions that limit coincidence and memory distortion. At present, the strongest public discussions of dream knowledge usually remain anecdotal. They may be sincere and striking, but they do not establish a new source of information. More grounded explanations remain available in most cases: forgotten exposure, inference, chance matching, and memory reconstruction can account for a great deal. This does not make such dreams meaningless. A dream that leads someone to research a real place, learn a forgotten history, or uncover a hidden interest can still be valuable. The value lies in the way the dream directs attention, not necessarily in where the information came from. Dreams often connect material that waking thought leaves separate. They can bring a person towards subjects that feel charged without any clear reason. This may reflect unconscious memory, emotional association, or a deep pattern of curiosity. The speculative question is whether, in rare cases, it reflects contact with a wider reality. The honest answer remains unresolved. With the weight of evidence still on ordinary cognition, there is another category that sits between unknown knowledge and familiar memory dream places that later resemble locations never knowingly visited. A person may dream of a street, a coastline, a staircase, or a room, then later encounter a similar place in waking life. The experience can be powerful because the match is visual and spatial, yet place recognition is especially vulnerable to pattern overlap. Many buildings share layouts, many towns share street arrangements, many landscapes contain familiar combinations of water, roads, slopes, and light. The brain is designed to detect spatial similarity quickly. A partial match can feel complete when emotion is high. The question is not whether the place feels recognized, but whether the dream contained precise features that were recorded beforehand and later matched beyond ordinary probability. Without that level of precision, the safer explanation is that memory and perception have found a resemblance and given it strong meaning. This does not close the door on wonder. It simply keeps the door from becoming an assumption. Unknown knowledge is the point where parallel universe dreams would need to become more than emotionally persuasive. If another branch of reality were somehow involved, information should occasionally appear that cannot be traced to this branch. But science cannot build a conclusion on the feeling that a fact was unknowable. It must examine how the fact was recorded, how it was checked, and what ordinary roots may have existed. The standard is demanding because the claim is large. A dream that truly carried information from another reality would change the study of mind, memory, and physics. Until evidence reaches that level, the most careful position is to treat such dreams as remarkable products of a mind that remembers more than it can recall, infers more than it can explain, and sometimes finds real patterns by chance. The mystery remains, but it becomes more exact. The strongest question is not whether dreams can feel like sources of unknown knowledge. They can. The stronger question is whether any dream knowledge survives careful verification after ordinary explanations have been exhausted. That question leads naturally toward identity, because the most persistent alternate life dreams are not only about facts that can be checked, they are about the sense of being someone whose choices have unfolded differently. Choice is where the idea of parallel lives becomes most personal, because choice is how a single life appears to narrow. Before a decision is made, several futures can be imagined. Afterward, one path becomes memory, and the others become counterfactuals, possible histories that remain emotionally present even though they did not happen in the known world. The brain is built to think this way. It compares actual outcomes with imagined alternatives, not only to produce regret or longing, but to learn. A person who narrowly avoids danger may imagine the worse outcome and become more careful. A person who declines an opportunity may later imagine the life that might have followed and use that comparison to understand desire, fear, or timing. Counterfactual thought is not a flaw in consciousness. It is part of how the mind evaluates reality. Dreams often take this ability and make it experiential. Instead of thinking about an unchosen path from a distance, the dreamer may inhabit it as though it has already become a life. A different apartment, a different profession, a different family arrangement, or a different country may appear not as speculation but as normal circumstance. The dream self does not stand outside the scenario and analyze it. The dream self belongs to it. This is why alternate life dreams can carry such force. They convert possibility into presence, In waking thought, the unchosen life is usually incomplete. It is a short sequence of imagined consequences, shaped by what the person already believes about the past. In a dream, the unchosen life can arrive with emotional weather already attached to it, with routines, attachments, and assumptions that make it feel settled. The dreamer may wake not only remembering a scene, but carrying the after effect of a different identity. This does not require another universe. It can be understood as a complex simulation built from memory, emotion, and the brain's capacity to model the self under different conditions. Yet it also explains why the parallel universe interpretation is so appealing. If the many worlds interpretation is correct in some form, then reality may contain histories in which outcomes diverge. If a dream places consciousness inside a life shaped by different outcomes, the experience feels as though the mind has briefly entered one of those histories. The scientific problem remains the same. No verified mechanism shows that information can pass from another branch into the sleeping brain, but the psychological resemblance is strong enough to deserve careful examination. Identity feels stable during ordinary life because memory creates continuity. The waking self remembers a childhood, a body, a name, a set of relationships, and a sequence of choices. These memories do not simply record identity, they help produce it. When sleep changes the way memory is organized, identity can become more flexible. A dream self may have memories that never existed before the dream. It may feel married to someone unknown in waking life, responsible for work never done, or shaped by losses that have no waking counterpart. The dream does not need to provide a full biography. It only needs enough emotional and contextual information for the self inside the dream to accept the role. This shows that the sense of being a particular person is not a single fixed object hidden inside the mind. It is a continuing construction, renewed by memory, bodily feeling, social context, and expectation. During sleep, those materials can be rearranged. The result may feel like another version of the same person, because the dream preserves some core sense of self while changing the life around it. That balance is important. If everything were different, the dream might feel like becoming someone else entirely. If nothing were different, it would simply feel like ordinary life. Alternate self-dreams often sit between these extremes. The dreamer is recognizable, but not identical. There may be the same temperament under different circumstances, the same emotional patterns expressed through another history, or the same unresolved question appearing in a new form. This is why such dreams can feel informative even when interpreted psychologically. They show how identity might shift if the surrounding life changed. A person who dreams of success in an abandoned field may not have contacted a parallel self, but may have encountered a dormant capacity. A person who dreams of loneliness in a life that once seemed desirable may be testing the emotional cost of a fantasy. A person who dreams of peace after making a feared decision may be rehearsing a future that waking anxiety has not allowed. The dream is not necessarily a message. It is a model with feeling inside it. The speculative layer adds another possibility, but it must be stated carefully. If other branches of reality exist, and if each contains versions of persons with their own continuity, then the question of identity becomes more difficult. A parallel version of a person would not be a ghost, a symbol, or a hidden advisor. Under many worlds thinking, such a version would be a full observer inside a separate history, with a body, memories, relationships, and a present moment that feels singular from within that branch. That version would not exist for the purpose of informing this one. It would be living its own life. This point reduces some of the fantasy surrounding the idea. Parallel selves, if they exist, would not be accessories to one primary self. Each would be primary to itself. The dream of another life, if taken literally, would therefore raise questions not only about access, but about respect. What is being glimpsed would not be a scene made for interpretation, but another centre of experience. There is no evidence that such contact occurs, but the idea changes the emotional meaning of alternate life dreams. It moves them away from simple wish fulfillment and toward the possibility, however unproven, of a broader identity distributed across separate histories. The safer scientific position remains within the known mind. Dreams of other choices can help the brain process regret without requiring a cosmic explanation. Regret is not only sadness over the past, it is a form of comparison between actual and imagined outcomes. The brain uses regret to refine future behavior, but regret can also become repetitive when the unchosen life is idealized. Dreams sometimes complicate that idealization. They may make the other path beautiful, ordinary, difficult, or unexpectedly empty. In this way, the sleeping mind can soften the full simplicity of what might have been. A life not taken is often imagined as pure gain or pure loss, but dreams can give it mixed consequences. This may be one of their psychological functions. They allow the mind to explore alternatives with emotional depth rather than abstract judgment. The result may be uncomfortable, but it can also be clarifying. The dreamer may wake with less certainty that another path would have solved everything, or with a renewed understanding that some desire has remained alive for a reason. Such insight does not depend on the dream being literal. It depends on the dream being emotionally organized enough to reveal a pattern. Parallel universe speculation often turns choice into branching destiny. But human life is not experienced as a clean diagram. Choices unfold through conditions already in motion: family, culture, biology, chance, opportunity, and limitation all shape what can be chosen. Even in physics, branching does not match human meaning one-to-one. A quantum branch is not the same as a personal crossroads. The dream of another life may focus on a single decision, but the actual difference between lives would involve countless interacting causes. This makes the idea of other selves both larger and less tidy than it first appears. An alternate version of a person would not simply be the same self plus one different choice. Over time, different circumstances would change habits, relationships, memories, and values. The self would diverge. A dream that presents another life may therefore be less a direct copy of a parallel branch and more an emotional shorthand for divergence itself. It asks what remains recognizable when the story changes. The answer may be less fixed than expected. Some traits persist across imagined lives. Others depend heavily on environment. This is one reason alternate life dreams can feel unsettling in a quiet way. They reveal that identity is durable, but not absolute. The same person can be imagined under another set of pressures and become partly unfamiliar. That unfamiliarity can be mistaken for evidence of another universe, but it can also be understood as the mind discovering its own range. The real question may not be whether every possible self exists somewhere else. It may be how many possible selves are already contained in the structure of one mind, waiting for circumstance, memory, or sleep to give them temporary form. A calm view can hold both possibilities without confusing them. Established science shows that dreams can simulate other lives and make them emotionally convincing. Quantum interpretation allows, but does not prove, a reality with multiple non-communicating histories. Between these ideas stands the dream of another self, meaningful but not settled. Its value may lie less in proving that another universe has been seen, and more in showing how deeply consciousness is shaped by paths, losses, and unrealized futures. The next movement turns from identity toward healing. because some dreams of other lives do not only raise questions about what might have happened, they seem to offer emotional rehearsal, repair, and forms of understanding that waking thought had not yet reached. The healing value of alternate life dreams does not depend on proving that they come from another universe. It begins with a more grounded observation. Dreams can place emotional problems into forms that waking thought may not reach directly. During sleep, the mind can combine memory, fear, desire, and bodily feeling into a living situation, and that situation can allow the dreamer to experience a pattern rather than merely think about it. A person who feels trapped may dream of a life where leaving was possible. A person who carries regret may dream of a path where the choice was made differently, only to find that the emotional result is more complex than expected. A person who cannot name a need may encounter a version of self who seems to live with that need already acknowledged. In ordinary psychological terms, these dreams are simulations. They are internally generated scenarios through which the brain tests possible meanings and emotional outcomes. Yet simulation can still be useful. The brain does not learn only from events that happen outside the body. It also learns from imagined action, remembered pain, anticipated danger, and rehearsed response. Dreams can take these internal rehearsals and make them immersive. This is why an alternate life dream can sometimes feel therapeutic, even when its content is strange or impossible. It gives the mind a temporary world in which an unresolved question is no longer abstract. The question becomes a home, a relationship, a profession, a departure, or a return. The emotional system responds to it as experience, and that response can reveal what waking analysis has kept at a distance. Modern neuroscience already recognizes sleep as important for emotional regulation and memory integration. Sleep does not simply preserve experience. It can alter the emotional charge of memory, connect recent events with older patterns, and help the brain update its sense of what matters. Rapid eye movement sleep, in particular, often contains vivid dreams and strong affect. While the chemical and network conditions of the brain differ from waking life, this may allow emotional material to be reprocessed in unusual ways. A painful event may appear in symbolic form. A conflict may be shifted into another setting. A fear may be replayed with changed roles. These processes are not always pleasant, and they are not always clear, but they show that dreaming participates in the ongoing work of adaptation. This speculative idea of parallel possibility adds a wider frame, but the therapeutic effect can be described without leaving known science. A dream of another self may help because it gives the brain a safe but convincing way to explore alternatives. It allows regret to become information rather than repetition. It allows longing to become a clue rather than a command. It allows fear to be tested in a world where the consequences end at waking, even if the emotional learning remains. Some alternate life dreams are meaningful because they show success. The dream self may speak with confidence, choose freely, or endure a loss with more steadiness than the waking self expects. Such dreams can leave behind a feeling of capacity. The person may wake with no proof of another timeline, but with a changed understanding of what the self might be able to do. This is not supernatural evidence. It is a normal feature of human imagination made powerful by sleep. The brain can rehearse action, and rehearsal can affect later behavior. Athletes, musicians, and learners benefit from mental practice while awake, because imagining a skill can engage parts of the same systems used in performance. Dreams are less controlled than deliberate practice, but they can still create emotional rehearsal. When the dream self acts differently, the waking mind may inherit some part of that difference as possibility. Other alternate life dreams are meaningful because they show cost. A person may dream of the life once idealized and find it lonely, narrow, or burdened in unexpected ways. This can soften regret, not by denying the value of the unchosen path, but by making it less perfect. Waking regret often simplifies the past. It imagines that one decision would have produced one clean outcome. Dreams can complicate that simplification by supplying texture. They can show that every life contains trade-offs, including the imagined one. A different career may bring pride but less intimacy. A different relationship may bring tenderness but also limitation. A different location may offer freedom but reduce belonging. These dream constructions may not be accurate in any literal sense, but they can help the mind loosen the hold of a single idealized alternative. Healing sometimes begins when the unchosen life stops appearing as a flawless refuge and becomes another human life with its own conditions. The parallel universe interpretation changes the emotional tone of this process. If another version of the self exists somewhere in a branching reality, then a healing dream might be imagined as contact with a self who has already carried one possible outcome. That idea is unproven, and it should remain separate from clinical explanation. Still, it reveals why these dreams can feel like receiving wisdom from elsewhere. The wisdom seems to come from a life that has been lived, not from advice made by waking thought. In psychological terms, this elsewhere may be the unconscious organization of memory and emotion. The mind contains more experience than the conscious self can easily access. It can detect patterns before they're put into language. It can hold contradictions without resolving them too quickly. A dream figure or alternate self may therefore speak, act, or feel with an authority that seems external because its source is hidden from waking awareness. This hiddenness does not make it less valuable. It only means that the wisdom may come from layers of the same mind rather than from another universe. In therapeutic practice, dreams are often approached not as literal messages, but as material for reflection. The exact interpretation depends on the person, the context, and the emotional effect. A dream of a parallel family may not mean that such a family exists in another branch. It may reveal a capacity for care, a grief over absence, or a question about belonging. A dream of a different profession may not be a glimpse of a real alternate career. It may show a desire for mastery, recognition, service, creativity, or escape. A dream of being older in another life may not provide information from the future. It may compress the mind's estimate of where current habits are leading. The value comes from careful integration. Integration means bringing the dream into waking thought without either dismissing it too quickly or obeying it too literally. A dream can be honored as emotionally real while still being questioned as factual evidence. This balance is especially important for dreams that feel like contact with another self. Taken too literally, they may encourage detachment from the actual life that needs attention. Dismissed too harshly, they may cause the person to ignore real emotional knowledge carried by the dream. A grounded approach asks what the dream makes clearer about values, fears, needs, and possible action. It does not require the dream to prove its cosmic origin before it can matter. Healing through parallel possibility also touches the problem of grief. Some people wake from dreams of alternate relationships with a sense of loss that has no public object. There may be no one to mourn in waking life, no shared history that others can confirm, yet the feeling remains. This kind of grief can be confusing because it seems to exceed its cause. Neuroscience can explain part of it by noting that attachment systems can respond to internally generated figures. The body does not wait for a legal record of existence before producing sorrow. If the dream has created a convincing bond, waking can create a real separation. The compassionate response is not to insist that the relationship was externally real, but to recognize that the feeling may be real and worth understanding. It may point toward loneliness, unrealized tenderness, unresolved loss, or the mind's capacity to love beyond the limits of current circumstance. The dream may also provide a form of symbolic companionship during periods when waking life feels restricted. This does not make it an alternate universe, but it makes it psychologically significant. The scientific future of these experiences would require better methods. Dream journals recorded immediately after waking, lucid dreaming protocols, sleep laboratory studies, and careful tracking of emotional aftereffects could help distinguish broad patterns from individual anecdotes. Such work would not begin by assuming parallel worlds. It would begin by examining how dreams of alternate selves affect memory, mood, decision-making, and personal growth. If unusual information ever appeared under controlled conditions, the question could widen. Until then, the most reliable conclusion is that alternate life dreams may heal because they allow the brain to explore possible selves in emotionally convincing form. They create a temporary distance from the fixed story of waking identity. From that distance, a person may see regret more gently, desire more clearly, and fear with less certainty. Whether or not any other self exists beyond the boundary of this life, the dream can reveal that the known self is not finished. It is still revising, still integrating, still testing the shape of a life against the many lives that might have been imagined. The final movement must return to the horizon of evidence, where neuroscience, quantum interpretation, ancient dream traditions, and human longing meet without becoming the same thing. The unproven horizon is not a failure of the subject. It is the place where the subject becomes honest. Dreams, consciousness, and quantum theory each contain real scientific difficulty, but they do not all become the same difficulty simply because they are strange. Dreaming belongs first to neuroscience. It can be studied through sleep stages, brain activity, memory processing, emotion, and reports gathered after waking. Quantum mechanics belongs first to physics. It can be studied through experiments on particles, fields, measurements, and mathematical predictions of great precision. Parallel universes, in the many worlds interpretation, belong to one serious way of reading quantum theory, but they remain beyond direct everyday observation. The idea that dreams may show another version of the self sits at the edge where these fields are often blended too quickly. A careful ending must slow the blend down. The known fact is that dreams can create convincing alternate lives. The speculative possibility is that a larger reality might contain other histories. The missing evidence is the bridge between them. Without that bridge, the dream remains meaningful, but not confirmed as contact. This distinction protects the mystery rather than weakening it. It keeps the question open without turning openness into certainty. The brain during sleep is already capable of more than older, simpler views allowed. It can build environments, organize emotion, simulate social encounters, and sometimes maintain enough awareness for lucid dreamers to signal outward. It can place the self inside unfamiliar conditions and allow that self to accept them as ordinary. It can produce grief for invented relationships, familiarity without clear memory, and a sense of return to places that do not exist on any waking map. These are not small effects. They show that consciousness is not a passive light shining on a fixed inner screen. It is an active process that models worlds, tests identities, and gives emotional weight to possible experience. For many dreams, this is explanation enough. The alternate life appears because the brain can generate a temporary biography from memory, prediction, and feeling. The dream self is real as an experience, even if the life around it is not independently real. That answer may seem less dramatic than a parallel universe, but it is still profound. It means that one mind can hold more possible forms of living than the waking self usually suspects. At the same time, physics does not make reality simple. Quantum theory has forced science to accept that the deep structure of the world is not built from the same intuitions that guide ordinary perception. Matter does not behave like miniature furniture. Measurement, probability, entanglement, and decoherence have shown that the familiar world emerges from processes that resist easy imagination. The many worlds interpretation is one attempt to take the mathematics seriously without adding a collapse event. If it is correct, then the single history remembered by one observer may be only one branch within a much larger structure. That idea naturally invites questions about other versions of persons and other paths of events. But the same interpretation also makes communication between branches deeply problematic. Decoherence is not a thin curtain. It is the process that makes branches effectively separate. A dream cannot be assumed to cross that separation just because dreams feel boundaryless. Feeling boundaryless is a property of consciousness. Crossing between quantum branches would require a physical process that has not been shown. This is the central line the script has kept returning to because it is the line between grounded speculation and unsupported claim. Ancient dream traditions add another layer, but they too must be handled carefully. Many cultures have treated dreams as significant experiences, sometimes as encounters with spirits, ancestors, future events, or other realms. Such traditions show that human beings have long recognized dreams as more than mental debris. They preserve practical attention to dream memory, symbolic meaning, and altered states of awareness. Yet ancient recognition of dream importance is not the same as scientific evidence for parallel universes. It is evidence that dreams have always felt powerful enough to demand interpretation. The modern question is different. It asks what can be measured, repeated, and separated from expectation. In this sense, ancient traditions and modern science do not need to be forced into agreement. They can be allowed to stand in dialogue. One preserves the human seriousness of dreaming. The other asks what mechanisms and evidence can support a claim. Between them, the dream remains both intimate and uncertain. A person may wake changed by a dream without knowing whether the change came from neural integration, symbolic insight, hidden memory, or something not yet understood. The change itself can be real while the explanation remains unsettled. This may be the most responsible way to approach dreams of another self. They should not be dismissed merely because they are subjective. Subjective experience is the only form in which consciousness is directly known. At the same time, they should not be promoted to proof merely because they feel certain. Certainty is one of the things the brain can generate. A dream can feel like a memory and still be a construction. A déjà vu moment can feel like return and still arise from a mismatch in familiarity. A dream fact can seem impossible to know and still come from forgotten exposure or inference. The mind is not unreliable in a simple sense. It is creative, predictive, and reconstructive. It is designed to make meaning under incomplete conditions. That is why it can survive a complex world, and also why its most vivid experiences need careful interpretation. The parallel universe idea remains valuable when treated as a question rather than a conclusion. It asks whether consciousness might be wider than the current brain-centered model can fully explain. It asks whether identity is only the path remembered here, or whether reality might contain other paths with their own observers. It asks why dreams can make the unchosen feel temporarily lived. These are philosophical and scientific questions at once. They do not become true because they are moving, but they do not become meaningless because they are unproven. They point toward areas where knowledge is still developing: the physics of measurement, the biology of consciousness, the function of dreaming, and the relationship between memory and self. Future research may sharpen the boundaries. Better sleep studies may show how recurring dream worlds are formed and maintained. Lucid dreaming experiments may improve communication with sleepers and reveal more about attention inside dreams. Neuroscience may explain how emotional memory gives imagined lives such force. Quantum biology may clarify whether any delicate quantum effects play a meaningful role in neural systems. Perhaps none of this will support contact with parallel realities. Perhaps it will show that the brain alone is stranger and more generative than expected, or perhaps in some narrow and unexpected way. Future evidence will reveal that consciousness participates in physical processes not yet understood. The responsible position leaves room for discovery without filling that room with claims ahead of the evidence. In the end, the title question can be answered only with care. Dreams may feel like parallel universes. They may show another self in the psychological sense, a possible version assembled from memory, desire, regret, fear, and unused capacity. They may reveal how different a life can feel when a few conditions are changed. They may even resemble what contact with another branch would feel like if such contact were physically possible. But present science does not show that the dreamer is seeing another literal self in another universe. The evidence supports a quieter conclusion. Dreams are powerful states of consciousness in which the brain can simulate reality so deeply that the boundary between memory and possibility becomes difficult to feel. The multiverse remains a serious speculation in physics, but its connection to personal dreaming remains unproven. Holding both facts together gives the subject its proper shape. The mystery is not closed, but it has edges. On one edge stands the sleeping brain, measurable and active. On another stands quantum theory, precise and difficult. On another stands human experience, private and emotionally persuasive. Where those edges approach one another, the idea of parallel universe dreams becomes a thoughtful question rather than a settled answer. Perhaps that is enough for now. Each night, the mind enters a state where it can loosen the story of the self and let other patterns appear. Some patterns are memory, some are emotional rehearsal, some are creative recombination, some may remain unexplained for longer than expected. The task is not to force them into certainty, but to notice what they reveal about consciousness. A dream of another life may not prove that another universe has opened. It may still show that one life contains shadows of many possible lives, and that the sleeping mind is able to walk among them for a while before morning restores the chosen path. The question now rests in a quieter place. Dreams do not need to become proof of another universe in order to remain meaningful. They already show that the sleeping mind can loosen the fixed shape of identity and allow other versions of experience to appear. A person may wake from another home, another relationship, another future, or another self. And even when the source is memory, emotion, and imagination, the effect can still be real. Science gives the dream firmer edges. It shows the sleeping brain at work, organizing memory, softening some forms of control, and building worlds from signals that do not require the outside world to be present. Physics gives the wider question its scale, reminding thought that reality at its deepest level may be stranger than ordinary perception suggests. But between those two fields, the bridge remains unproven. The dream may feel like a window, yet present evidence cannot say that another literal self has been seen through it. What remains is a patient uncertainty, neither empty nor complete. The unchosen life may be a branch of the mind, a symbolic rehearsal, a trace of longing, or simply one of the many ways consciousness studies itself while the body rests. Each explanation has its own dignity. The mystery becomes calmer when it is not forced. A dream can be allowed to fade without being dismissed. A feeling can be honored without being turned into proof. And the self that wakes can carry something useful back from the night, a softened regret, a clearer desire, a wider sense of what one life may contain. Whether the dream was only internal or something stranger, it has still shown that consciousness is not narrow. It can move among possibilities, gather meaning from them, and return quietly to the morning world.